many friends do you have whose parents or grandparents speak Spanish or Japanese or maybe French, but the only language your friends speak is English?
Now, that may not seem like such a big deal to most of you, but imagine what would happen if no one chose to carry on the Spanish or Japanese language.
Or no one played folk music, blues, jazz, or classical music. Only the older generation would know these things, and when they died, so would those pieces of a culture.
Obviously, that's not going to happen because those languages and populations are large and those forms of music are still popular. But that's not always the case.
In Nicaragua, small tribes, their languages, their stories, and their music are in danger of disappearing forever. This is happening to the Rama, Miskito, and Garofno peoples. They represent cultures that are very different from Nicaragua's Spanish-speaking majority.
In the following CNN report, you'll see how these people are working to keep their cultures alive.
Nicaragua's Rama Indians are trying to hang on to their language and culture. There are only about 700 Ramas left, and most of them live here on Rama Key, a small island along Nicaragua's southern Atlantic coast.
The Rama people have not allowed to marry to other tribes, except to their own people. So that is one of the most things that would be able to keep the Rama culture alive.
McRae is a Rama and the pastor of the Moravian Church. Like most Ramas, he has little ability to speak the Rama language. 68-year-old Miss Nora is one of the few Ramas fluent in the language.
God gave me that language, and it look like now the people only want to speak Spanish and broken English. They don't want to speak their own language. But I don't want to abolish my language. You said you were in Rama?
With the help of some international money, Miss Nora is developing an elementary language course for local school children. Language, culture, history, and geographic barriers separate the remote Atlantic Coast region from the rest of Nicaragua. In many ways, it's like being in another country. The Atlantic Coast's Indian groups are a minority within a minority population. Only 400,000 of Nicaragua's 4 million people live in the sprawling rainforest region. The language and culture of the more populous Miskito Indians living in scattered villages in the north are relatively intact.
The Miskitos were colonized by the British like the rest of indigenous people on the Atlantic coast. But the British invented something that was called the Miskito Kingdom. And this made the Miskitos be over the other group.
Many of Nicaragua's Garifano Indians live in the village of Orinoco on the banks of what is known as Big Lagoon. They are descendants of African slaves and Carib Indians from the Caribbean island of St. Vincent, who migrated here in the last century.
It seems like our tradition is going down, but the same people who were here and is still here still have that believe and feels themselves like Garifuna.
Of all the Garifanos in Nicaragua, only a handful of people still know the language.
I sing in my language, and I speak it. Dagayalui banidane, Dagayalui banidane.
Nicaragua, traditionally thought of as a strictly Hispanic country, has a multi-ethnic past and present. The question is whether it will have a multicultural future. Ronnie Lovler, CNN, Rama Key, Nicaragua.
So how do you preserve a culture? As older generations die, well, who will pass on the language and rituals that were passed on to them by the previous generation?
You know, it's an important question, because Nicaragua is not the only place that may lose parts of its multi-ethnic heritage.
Well, in many parts of the world, anthropologists record native speakers and photograph and document their traditions.
Maybe efforts like these and the younger generation's desire to hold on to their past will preserve these cultures.